Imagine, if you will, a world without Christmas. Well, that's what the Grinch wanted.
Or so we thought, but it actually runs a whole lot deeper.
It was the winter of 1982. And as we all know, the Grinch was born green, mean, and Christmas.
We're assuming you've already seen our video about who the Grinch is.
Yeah, so
It's going to be up
here,
there.
if you haven't seen it, just watch that one.
Yeah, so we understand that you guys know he's green and evil and hates Christmas, but what we figured out was it goes a lot deeper than that, you know. So we'd like to tell you the dark truth of the Grinch. The first stolen Christmas. It was in Whoville. Everyone was having a fantastic day, excited for Christmas, except for one man who lived in a cave, cruel, evil, and wicked.
Ladies and gentlemen, this man was the Grinch.
He was.
And he was sitting there in his cave, plodding away. And if you guys, we covered this in our video about the Grinch. So watch that one. But anyway, I'm sure you're all familiar with the tale. The Grinch, he began, his heart was tiny, and he was evil and cranky, and he hated Christmas.
He was born with a heart 2 times too small.
Yeah. But then if you'll recall the events of how the Grinch stole Christmas, the original novel.
Yeah. The first novel. It was like a scripture too. It's real.
Yeah.
Hey, for all you Grinch non-believers, click off the video.
Anyone who doesn't believe in this, watch this video.
Click off.
Anyway. Back to the task at hand.
Yeah.
The Grinch, he realized the true value of Christmas after he stole all the gifts. They still had a great Christmas. He went, maybe something's wrong with me, not with the Christmas.
I think you skipped a step here. So he did, in fact, steal Christmas. He pulled off an amazing ploy and stole all the presents from every single kid, right?
Yeah.
Right under their noses, right before Christmas.
Historians call it the Great Christmas Heist. It's never been done before.
Never done before. How he stole Christmas, it's a mystery to most, you know? As fast as Santa Claus, debatable, you know? If you guys didn't know, Santa Claus has a special thing called Santa Time, and he runs on a completely different space and time to most. And if he touches you, you go into Santa Time.
It's puzzled historians for many decades at how Santa is able to travel to different houses, dropping the presents off. Sips the milk, crumbles the cookies. Maybe he bites the carrots as well. We
Down
don't
the
know.
chimney.
We think he might feed it to the reindeer, but also it might be implausible because the reindeer, they'd be operating on their own time schedule because Santa's not near them.
To be honest, we're a bit skeptical that there are reindeers to begin with.
We think he might just do it by himself, to be honest.
So we've thought of this theory. We call it Santa Time.
So every year, I don't know if you guys have ever seen it, but the run, Santa's run, his run of which order he's going to do the houses, it gets leaked every year.
Every November.
And if you'll see that your house address is one of the last, we estimate probably 10 to 20 last houses on his run. So in the entire world, the last 10 to 20 houses, he goes into the houses and he fucks the fathers.
He does.
And you know, Santa's super fast. He'd be like, oh, they wouldn't even notice it happens.
Because he runs on Santa Time.
Our Santa Time theory would allow, if Santa touches a person, they would enter his realm of time, of Santa Time.
So, hold on. Just for some context here, after delivering to about 7 billion children, he gets really freaky, alright?
Yeah.
Like, it's hard work, it's hard labor. And in Santa Time, that costs him years and years, you know? That's in Santa Time. Or is it the opposite?
He experiences time, so 1 second for us is about, we would estimate a couple of days for Santa. That's just
Santa
how
time.
fast he has to be.
Yeah.
So he lives his life incredibly slowly.
Yeah, so Christmas Day, for us, 1 sleep, you know? And there's presents on the table. For Santa, that's like years, decades worth of work. And can you imagine how much tension you'd have built up? So if you do end up on one of the last houses of Santa's run, if you're a dad, I'd be careful because Santa usually fucks the dads.
Yeah.
And this is when they enter Santa Time.
Yeah.
So when he touches them and he's fucking them, they enter Santa Time. So it would probably be like a pleasant duration of sex. But to your dad, if he isn't in Santa Time, it'd be like, oh, yeah, done. Yeah.
But That's why Santa wears gloves. I think you're all aware. Because if he makes skin-to-skin contact, you'll enter Santa time. And if he's not wearing gloves, if he's feeling particularly cruel, he'll take them off. And he will touch. And if a person enters Santa time, they feel it incredibly slowly.
They do.
So well, it's a couple of pumps for
most dads won't notice if they're the dad that got Santa.
Most dads won't notice, but if they accidentally
if he takes
Santa
off of his
time,
glove and accidentally enters Santa time,
they'll feel every second an excruciatingly long, like agonizing time.
And that leads us to the first recorded case of Santa's misuse of dads. It was Gregory Sanchez in 1947. He reported that he woke up with milk and cookie crumbs in his asshole.
Gregory Sanchez was admitted to St. Columba's private hospital with multiple lacerations to his anus. And no one could really tell what caused these because the leftover, the residue,
yeah.
The fact that it tore parts of his skin out in small chunks would mean it had to be traveling at hundreds of kilometers per second.
Yeah, it was no normal plappage. It was something supernatural.
There was something nefarious afoot.
Now, you might think that because Santa is doing such cruel actions, you know, and he's meant to be this sort of pinnacle of hope and beauty, what could possess him to do these things to people? And you might think it's the Grinch. And that would be a dark truth. But it's not. After the Grinch stole Christmas, he saw all the kids in Whoville still having fun and still showing the Christmas spirit.
And it was at this moment that at least the novel depicts it in such a way that his heart actually grew several sizes. And if you remember,
I think it was 3 times
I
as
believe
large.
it was 3 times as large. I think we may have covered it in this video.
Probably covered it right up here. If you haven't seen that, watch this video.
If you haven't seen that video, watch this video because it's you know, we go into depth about this kind of thing. Anyway, so the Grinch's heart, if you'll remember, it began small and shriveled like an apricot.
Like an apricot.
But that Christmas morning, as the morning dawned over the town of Whoville, and he watched, waiting with his fingers crossed, he's ready to.
He was expecting a payback for the sort of dread that he had felt.
Yeah.
And when he saw everyone still having fun, despite something being taken from them, he sort of felt that sort of empathy, you know?
And it was at this moment that his heart actually grew.
3 times as large, or 10 times as large.
Cardiologists agree that this would be fatal to anyone, especially the Grinch.
And something similar to a snake,
Yeah.
I read.
Yeah, we'll link the
that up
video up here.
Cobra snake.
Why does no one talk about this? Is kind of what we're asking. You know, how would he would have been killed instantly? His heart would burst. The change in pressure would cause his blood to boil.
Yeah,
to be honest.
and actually that is what happened.
Yeah.
Or so we thought.
Or so we thought.
So it was actually Santa who killed the Grinch after he saw that. He was like, he must have Santa time to have stolen Christmas from everyone.
Yeah.
And for the Grinch to possess Santa time would mean that he had like
the mutant Santa gene. And as we all know, Santa, he's been going around fucking people.
fucking dads.
So, did he fuck the Grinch's father?
Grinch's father was known to cheat on Mrs. Grinch frequently. The extent of that, however, wasn't known until quite recently.
So, Grinchologist Terry Grimbles created this family tree to show us just exactly how far the Grinch line goes back.
And here you can see that there's a question mark in this spot, you know? Because the Grinch, Father Grinch, Father Grinch, there's no recorded history of Mrs. Grinch ever being pregnant. So everyone wonders who the real mother of the Grinch who stole Christmas, this is the Grinch, was. And that's where we speculate that it was Santa Claus. Because how else would the Grinch have the Santa time gene?
Exactly. So the Santa time gene, it is on the 600th nucleotide in the 7th strand of Grinch DNA.
Yeah.
And this is impossible because the Grinch wouldn't have the father Grinch. He didn't have Santa time. And we know that for a fact because he was hit by a car and he died.
He did die. if he had Santa time, he would have survived.
He would have been able to move out of the way of that car. So
because he could slow... Or he operates on a different time if you're in Santa time.
Yeah. Anyway.
After the feat of the stolen Christmas, Santa was pissed off at, for what we now know as, his own son. And he used his Santa time to quickly speed over to the Grinch's home and killed the Grinch.
If you're familiar with the tale of John Lennon, we do know that while he was shot, he was actually on his way to kill his son. And we believe that this may have been an homage to the Grinch and the Grinch's father, who was actually Santa Claus. John Lennon was a member of the Beatles.
John Lennon was mostly known as the leader of the Beatles.
An incredibly popular British rock band.
Very popular.
Mainly popular in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And John Lennon was one such member of the band who was very
infamous. You know?
Infamous for his behavior and his actions.
Yeah.
Particularly the fact that he liked Asian slimmies.
It's also, what if John Lennon had possessed Santa time, he probably could have survived being shot.
Yeah.
So this is sort of just to let you know the true power of Santa time.
Yeah.
Because I don't think you guys are really getting it.
Guys, again, if you want to know more about Santa time,
And John
we
Lennon.
did make a video about that.
Yep.
We also made this video about John Lennon. So if you want to watch that video as well, we highly recommend that you do.
So anyways, after the Grinch had stolen Christmas, Santa used his Santa time to go over to the cave in Whoville and kill the Grinch, which he did, quite brutally actually. Remains were found,
Yeah.
his skin peeled off, nowhere to be seen, not a single hair of green anywhere. So we think that Santa probably used it to make a fur coat for Mrs. Claus
Yep.
or something like that.
If you'll see depictions from the 7th Christmas age, Mrs. Claus is seen to be wearing some sort of shaggy coat.
Some sort of shaggy-
Obviously, they didn't have colours back then. It's all in black and white.
No.
But if you look closely, the texture does look familiar.
Resembles
to
the
that of
Grinch. Now, you might think, wow, have we just uncovered the end of the Grinch? But no. Somehow he was back.
Somehow the Grinch returned.
With a vengeance. Grinch 2.
Revenge of the Grinch.
Now, after the first Christmas that had been stolen, the Grinch was left with an almost rage. His heart had grew 10 times as big, and he thought he understood the meaning of Christmas until his dad, the creator of Christmas, killed him. Right? Or so we thought. So now he's back with a vengeance, and he's like, I'm not going to steal Christmas because his dad loves Christmas, but that didn't quite work. So what might hit his dad a little harder was if he killed every kid on Christmas Day.
And as we all know, if there's no more kids, there are no more Christmas.
No more Christmas if there are no more kids.
Santa doesn't deliver gifts to adults. He only delivers gifts to children.
Why? Have you ever heard of an adult who got a gift from Santa? It might be because they have a childlike soul. Anyways. And so he did. He left his little Grinch cave on Christmas Eve and started killing children. Fortunately, the Sandman noticed. The Sandman from Rise of the Guardians.
Yeah,
The little yellow star guy.
As we all know, guys, the Sandman, he feasts on dreams, and he can see through any person's dreams to see the truth of their condition.
He does do that.
So that particular Christmas Eve, he noticed that all the dreams were disappearing.
He was like, I'm hungry. And he's usually definitely not hungry on Christmas because that's when the most people sleep.
Yeah, and that's when the most dreams are had for the next day, for the joy of Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
So he went to bed expecting obviously he feasts while he's asleep because he's the Sandman.
Yeah.
He went to bed that night, that Christmas, expecting to wake up fully restored. But he woke up in the middle of that night.
With a night terror.
With a night terror. And as we all know, the Sandman, he does not have night terrors.
Not
because he creates the most beautiful dreams.
Except that evil guy from Rise of the Guardians who
Pull him
I think
up.
he
made
was a
night
night terror, I think.
We made a video about Rise of the Guardians, if you guys want to watch that here. It's actually quite accurate to reality.
Yeah, it happened. I mean, this is sort of like history that they don't teach you in school.
Yeah.
So we just want to inform you guys.
Yeah. Anyway, so the Sandman, he wakes up in the middle of the night and he goes, I haven't feasted on any dreams tonight.
Or a significantly lower amount of dreams.
Significantly lower amount of dreams. Most of them involving killing children and getting revenge. And he said, that's not the kind of dreams that children have on
Christmas.
Christmas.
You could smell the color green in the air that night, you know? And the color green was potent that night.
Yeah.
So he called up his friend Jack Frost, leader of Ice. And so Jack Frost is friends with the Sandman, as we all know.
Yeah,
He's also like invisible or something. I can't remember. But Jack Frost eventually was sent out on a top secret message to stop the Grinch from ruining Christmas this time. So what he did was he looked at Santa's projected timeline, which had come out because this was Christmas Eve, and that comes out in November, as we covered earlier.
Yeah. If you guys haven't seen it yet, here is his run for this year.
And the Grinch was obviously following the run.
Yeah.
Because it's just sort of the most efficient way to get to every house.
Yeah.
And it also runs on Santa time, which we've covered. The Grinch does have Santa time. So, anyways, Jack Frost and Sandman worked together to sort of like cross-locate where the Grinch might be after the dreams he was losing, you know?
Yeah.
So he pinpointed the Grinch and he went over there and he froze him with his ice powers.
As we all know, Jack Frost is the leader of Ice.
And another end for the Grinch, you might think. He was. It was the end. It was the end of the Grinch.
He died.
He died.
He actually died for real.
But not really, because he was frozen. And so Jack Frost froze him in a big cube, an ice cube, some would call them.
Yeah.
And he sent him to space.
He did.
No.
So, picture this. We've got the Grinch frozen in ice, trapped in ice, and he's now rotating above his town.
Yeah,
He's
the world.
He's in the upper stratosphere.
Yeah. So, after 1 million children killed in The Grinch 2, you know, the world was sort of in a stage of recovery. You know, many kids were blessed with presents the next day, except for the families that lost those kids. Santa did try to impregnate mothers in Santa time so that they would have children the next day of Christmas. But
as we all know, Santa, because he has Santa time, he also has hypervirile seeds.
so if he, oh no, it's also because he touches the woman.
Yeah.
And she'll enter Santa time, and she'll go through all 9 months of pregnancy, and in the next day in real time, there will be a new spawn.
Yeah.
So
Santa, he tried his best to repopulate the planet to try and minimize the damage. It didn't really work, as we know.
Santa, alongside Elon Musk, did their best to stop the low population problem. So Elon Musk is now the richest man in the world, but back then he wasn't so much as a fly. He wasn't a fly. And this is where we get into the dark truth of the Grinch. So now you know how the Grinch has happened. So now you guys know what the Grinch has done. You know, Christmas 1, stealing of Christmas. Christmas 2, revenge of the Grinch, kills a lot of children. But now he's frozen in space. So you might think like,
his reign of terror must be over.
and that might be the dark truth, was when he killed all those kids. But
Yeah.
we haven't even gotten started.
This is barely the tip of the dark iceberg of the truth of the dark truth of the
The
Grinch.
tip of his green penis has not even been tickled.
The tip of the greenness.
His greenness. I'm going to put a picture on screen of the Grinch iceberg. On the top of the iceberg, you can see Grinch 1 and Grinch 2.
Yeah.
And we've uncovered those in depth at the start of this video.
But now,
We're going to get to Grinch 3 and Grinch 4.
Grinch
Grinch 3, how do you get back from space?
so for all you deep Christmas historians, I'm gonna do that. For all you deep Christmas historians, you'll be familiar with the War of the Poles, the First War of the Poles, also known as the Jolly Revolution.
And what year was that?
And that was just 1 year after the events of Grinch 2, Revenge of the Grinch.
Yeah. So 2001.
Yeah. So
Many tragedies that year.
the most significant tragedy that year was the War of the Poles, in which we can't even estimate how many elves died. So, for all of you guys who don't know, we did do a video on the War of the Poles. It's up there if you want to watch it. Basically, a revolution was held within the North Pole, and someone from the South Pole came up as a major power during that time, and we know him to be John Christmas. And he led an elf revolution on the North Pole, on Santa's workshop, which resulted in the casualties of countless elves.
And why, you ask? He was sick and tired of the terrible work ethic that Santa and his elves had.
Yeah.
He thought that toys and stuff could be made in a much more ethical way.
Yeah.
And to be fair, he was right. You know, Santa was doing some terrible things over there. But was that enough to start a war?
Well, it goes much deeper than that. So John Christmas was born in the late 60s, around the time the Beatles were very popular.
Yeah.
So by the time...
His favorite song was Something.
His favorite song was Something. He was a big George Harrison fan, so when George Harrison died of cancer, he thought...
What year was that? John Christmas. Who is John Christmas, you may ask?
Well, to most, he's a cruel, villainous tyrant who murdered trillions of elves by his own bloody hands in the North Pole during the War of the Poles. But to real historians who look deeper, he was actually a liberation army.
So Santa Claus and the elves had a terrible work ethic in the North Pole. They would create presents basically throughout the whole year, and it was just elf torture, you know. And
Santa, he even had multiple complaints, abuse allegations that the elf front office just they wouldn't catch.
They ignored them because Santa was also friends with Ellen DeGeneres and Diddy as well. So he was sort of like this Illuminati circle thing. But John Christmas, born in the South Pole, he had nothing to do with any of that stuff, you know? Like, he didn't understand anything in pop culture except for the Beatles. Yeah. So he was sort of, just saw the injustice that Santa was doing, and he saw it, and he wanted to do something about it. So he did create an elf army, and that's where the War of the Poles began.
The War of the Poles was really the first full-scale conflict between elves. So we sort of had one in the Middle Ages. The tinkly.
Yeah, but those weren't Christmas elves. Those were
just common or garden elves.
Yeah, and sort of like the sort of elves that you see in things like Lord of the Rings.
Yes,
you know.
So Christmas elves
they're
really,
a smaller breed.
For a good proportion of history, they're very peaceful. They worked very hard for Santa Claus.
Very hard-working elves.
But most people didn't realize that elves actually populated the South Pole as well, which is where John Christmas started building. He sort of started gaining a reputation down there for being the father of the elves.
He was actually the creator of Christmas, and Santa took credit for it. Because if you think deeply, Santa's last name is Claus and not Christmas, and that's because his claws ripped Christmas out of John's hands.
Yeah.
It's quite a metaphor. So not only was Santa doing terrible things to the elves up in the North Pole, but he had stolen Christmas from John, and that was a major point of contention, you know? Like, and that's why the War of the Poles started, you know? So thousands of elves did die in this war, and who emerged victorious? But Santa Claus.
John Christmas was beheaded.
He was.
And and Santa, using his Santa time, he basically threw his head as a message to all of the South Pole elves. He threw his head into the upper atmosphere to make sure that no one would ever see the face of John Christmas ever again. But if you remember, something else was also in the upper atmosphere.
You know, it was unfortunate that John wasn't aware of Santa time. There wasn't a leading theory around that time. No one really knew what Santa time was.
John was a realist. He didn't believe in Santa time.
He did
He thought, you know what, he's just very fast.
Yeah, he's a quick boy, but I have pride.
But unfortunately, John Christmas, he could not keep up with Santa.
So when Santa threw the head into the upper stratosphere, what did it bump but the frozen cube of the Grinch?
So picture this. You're the Grinch in a frozen cube. You're rotating very slowly in the upper atmosphere. And you've been up there for a couple of years by now. Remember, if you'll remember, the Grinch 2, Revenge of the Grinch, was Christmas. It's now been a whole other year.
It's a whole other year.
Where the Battle of the Poles, the War of the Poles, was fought. And
it's a long war.
It was a very long war. So, you know, the Grinch, he's been up there for a while, and he's been plotting. And you know, he's just about to go, maybe, you know what? Maybe it's not worth revenge. You know, maybe I've learnt my lesson this time, when a flaming head plows into the frozen cube of the Grinch. And, you know, he throws it down there. Santa threw it so fast, it erupted into flames.
Mm-hmm,
and those flames were so powerful because of the Santa time that the residue of the Santa time was still on there, so the flames didn't go out when they went into space.
Yeah.
And it basically impacted the Grinch cube. It basically impacted the Grinch cube at such a velocity that the cube immediately cracked, and the Grinch fell straight down through the upper atmosphere, where he fell for probably a good 10 minutes before he impacted.
So the Grinch landed in the roof of a young boy's house. He crashed through the tiles, and a loud thump he heard in his attic. The kid went up into the attic. He saw this horribly green creature shivering from the cold. No, because he was burning in the atmosphere.
I reckon all of his skin burnt off, so he was black and charred.
A hairless, charred Grinch in his
grotesque creature.
in his basement,
Yeah.
in his upper basement, in his attic.
Guys, if you don't know the difference between a basement and an upper basement, we did do a video on that, so feel free to watch that one.
It was sort of like an ET situation, you know? Boy, alien, how will they interact?
The first child that he saw, because if you remember the Grinch 2 Revenge of the Grinch, he killed so many children that it was basically part of his nature now.
The Grinch, in a state of fear, in a state of misunderstanding, he hadn't had time to think while he was frozen. So when he was unfrozen and landed, he thought he was still killing everyone on Christmas Day.
So he got right back to it.
He killed that child that day. And then he looked outside and he was like, where are all the decorations?
Because it was actually mid-autumn by the time he landed.
Completely, and he was in Kazakhstan. He's landed in 2001 in the Twin Towers. People thought it was a plane. It was the Grinch. The second plane was a coincidence.
The second plane? Yeah. You ever wonder why no one ever saw the first plane?
Jet fuel can't melt steel beams, but Santa time can tear it away.
Santa time fire, boiling on the blood of a demigod. John Christmas. If we didn't cover that, he is a demigod.
Check out this video.
Check out this video, John Christmas Origins. The boiling head of, and in case we didn't cover it, it's actually attached to the Grinch as it hit him out of his Grinch cube. The head is basically making its way like into his skin, so it's almost melding with him. So as the Grinch falls out of the sky and plummets into the North Tower, the beams begin to melt and crumble because that fire is boiling so hot and so fast because it is still on Santa time.
Yeah.
And because the Grinch has Santa time.
Like, look at this. Imagine a fire right now. Fire on Santa time. You know, like. Anyways, while all of this was happening, we forgot to talk to you about his dog Max.
Grinch's dog Max.
Grinch's dog Max.
Nothing really important about Grinch's dog Max.
So we're not going to talk about him in this video.
But if you do want to know more,
so while the Grinch has been on these rages and been in space and all sorts of other sort of things, Grinch's dog Max had been relentlessly searching for his owner. So much so that he died because the Grinch could not feed him his Grinch food. He starved to death that night.
So it took the Grinch about 2 months to return from Kazakhstan. Oh no, it took him about 2 months to travel from New York back to his home, his Grinch cave home.
And not to mention the many months he spent in space.
Yeah. So by the time he actually got back to his house, his dog Max was a pile of bones, and he thought to himself,
"This is like the Alice in Chains song."
This is like the Alice in Chains song.
That's what he was thinking about. And then he was hit with this wave of grief. For as much disdain he had in his heart for Christmas, it was matched with love for his dog.
Yeah. And really, those emotions melted together to make one thing clear to the Grinch.
One pure emotion.
Hatred
and rage.
Grinch basically decided, Santa Claus, he's got to go. And this is where we really get into the events of Grinch 4, The Last Grinch. So the Grinch 4, The Last Grinch, we sort of open with the Grinch on his path of revenge and anger. And he's making his way to the North Pole. And he's like, I'm going to kill Santa.
Because Santa killed my dog.
Because Santa killed the only thing I really care about, my dog Max.
Which is a huge misunderstanding and was detrimental for the rest of the world.
Yeah.
So, anyways, so Santa makes his way to the North Pole, which was very easy for him in Santa time. Because as you know, his dad was Santa. So this has been a father-son rivalry of the ages. You know, it's more important than John Lennon and Julian Lennon.
More important than John Lennon and Sean Lennon.
More important than the guy from Up and Russell. Father and son duos. More important than Rick and Morty. Now, this, despite all those other father-son duos I just listed, was fueling with rage at this point in time, you know?
Yep.
Burning like a fire on Santa time times 4.
Yeah.
Times 4 Santa time.
4 times 4 Santa times. The
That's
power of 4.
That's how much passion was burning.
Yeah.
So once he arrived at the North Pole, he had this sort of green aura with flies.
So all this hatred sort of built around the Grinch. It's like an almost visible aura. Picture this. Santa Claus wakes up. We estimate around 9:15 in the morning.
He usually wakes up about that time, has a cookie that Mrs. Claus had freshly baked for him in the oven, and he steps outside his front door to go to the elf factories. He sees the Grinch standing there with his aura and his bloodthirsty mind.
Yeah. If you guys didn't know, Santa can read minds.
He can read
and
minds.
he could read that mind.
How do
He
you
was
think
so angry, he could read it from a far
How do you
away.
think Santa tells who's naughty or nice?
Yeah. He reads your mind.
He was reading the Grinch's mind and he could not see nice at all, just naughty. Pure naughtiness, which he has never seen in anyone except for Hitler. So... And Santa hasn't fought a foe like Hitler since Hitler's death, when Santa killed him. So Santa was ill-prepared for a battle that would determine the rest of history.
So, we've got these two major players. We've got Santa Claus and we've got the Grinch. And they're staring at each other from across this large wife. The Grinch dives at him and he kills him. He rips his head off. He eats his brains. So just building it up. So it's like...
You did not build it up.
So we've got... We've got these two major players, They're staring at each other from opposite ends of a snowy battlefield. So that, Santa's, he's looking at the Grinch, he's thinking, how am I going to fit? The Grinch dives at Santa Claus.
Yeah, the Grinch isn't even thinking.
He's not
He's
even
acting on
stuck.
pure animalistic primal instinct.
Yeah. So Santa goes, he thinks about what he's going to say to it. He hasn't really talked to the Grinch. He's killed him. He hasn't really killed him. He thinks he's seen a ghost. And so he walks up to the Grinch and he says, you know what, son? I think it's time we had a chat. The Grinch sticks his hand down Santa's throat, rips all of his organs out, starts eating them.
Starts eating them because they taste like candy canes. And it's just sugar, he gets hit with this sugar rush. He just keeps eating
And
it.
he's on the ground begging and screaming.
Let me go, son! Oh, let me go, son!
He's choking on his own blood, which is also very sugary.
And that's why the Grinch thinks he's saying ho, 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 but he's choking. And everyone knows that Christmas stuff pisses the Grinch off. So every ho, he just wants to eat more organ.
He's just pummeling Santa in the face. And the Santa's, he's begging for help. He's screaming out for the elves. The elves are watching through the workshop windows. And they haven't forgotten the War of the Poles.
They're in fear.
They're in fear.
But they're also feeling a sort of justice.
Yeah.
Because they're like, we might never have to make presents again.
Yeah. And so we estimate it took maybe 5 minutes for the Grinch to entirely destroy Santa Claus with his bare hands.
Sorry. And the elves actually did not see what was going on because this was all happening in Santa time. So they literally looked out the window, saw Santa and the Grinch standing there, and they blinked. Santa's bloody remains were smeared across the snowy battlefield, and the Grinch standing back to Santa Claus, just with aura, with flies, looking out into the sunset. So we've talked about the aftermath of the Grinch 2, but this is the aftermath of the Grinch 4, the final battle, the revenge of the Grinch, and the misunderstanding. So this is quite insane, actually, and most of you guys will be shocked to hear this, but Santa was dead because the Grinch ravaged him to pieces.
Yeah.
But the Grinch also died. His heart, after killing Santa Claus, was growing at rates and shrinking at rates that were unprecedented. He was born with a heart 2 times as small, and his heart grew 3 times as large. He obviously had some outstanding heart conditions.
Yeah.
So his heart grew about 10 times as big, fueled with just passion, And it's like sort of post-nut clarity. After killing Santa Claus, he had post-Grinch clarity.
Yeah.
Post-Grinch clarity.
He went Grinch mode.
Yeah, he did. He activated Grinch mode Mega. He activated Mega Grinch mode. And he grew. His heart grew 10 times as large, and it literally just fucking killed him instantly.
Yeah.
Now you might think, alright boys, that's some bullshit. Santa's still giving presents out to this very day. Now, here's where I ask you, have you ever been to a mall?
Santa's in every single one. How could he possibly... Even with Santa time, he can't be observed at the exact same instance.
Yeah, we have photos.
It's against the quantum physics,
It's against the physics of Santa time.
So...
And also, take a good look at your mall Santa.
Yeah.
Does he look like a Claus?
Maybe he's black.
Maybe the liberals have taken over Christmas.
It's really indicative of sort of a really messy cover-up. You know, they couldn't find someone to replace Santa, so they replaced Santa.
And by they we mean the gods, because Santa was a demigod as well as the Grinch, and as well as John Christmas. Santa Claus is the son of Zeus and Claus,
the god of gifts,
the god of kindness. And Zeus has the wrath, so that's how Santa had that demon in him that made him fuck dads on Christmas. And so let me just give you a quick thing. Santa Claus, Zeus, and Claus make Santa. Grinch, Santa, and Father Grinch, right? Terrible thing that happened there. Some cheating.
And,
it was a scandal.
The wrath gene, that's recessive.
Yeah.
So the Grinch inherited only the wrath gene, not the kindness gene.
He did not get any Claus in him. Only Zeus.
Only Zeus, which is
and
how
Father
he was so
Grinch.
powerful as well.
And Father Grinch, who was also quite a cruel human being, cheated on his wife. He sort of planted the seed that was the Grinch. Literally, planted that seed, also known as a sperm. Now, where were we going with this? So these two tyrants had battled, had both died, and the world was left in a state of uncertainty.
Yeah. And as we know, imbalance tends to resolve itself.
It does.
Which is why we believe that Santa was replaced that day, but not by
Not very
a
well.
single person. He was replaced across the globe to sort of settle the sort of feeling of uneasiness that Santa was gone.
So the gods pulled up Google Maps and they typed in mall, and so they looked at every shopping center in the globe and they were like, let's put a Santa there. 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 Also, he sent all the elves to China. Ever wonder why your presents say made in China? Elves are there now.
The North Pole was completely scrapped.
Abandoned.
You know,
It's abandoned.
Santa's remains were still on Santa time, so they began to
They disintegrated
Yep.
fairly quickly.
Yep.
Yeah.
But as we all know, the gods do leave a radiation, sort of like an effect. So the North Pole is now inhabitable.
It's like no one lives there.
It's a barren wasteland.
It used to be a town like full of gifting and wooden houses. Frosty lived there. Frosty can't live there anymore. Frosty's in Alaska now. Rudolph with his nose. Oh, sorry, we don't believe in reindeers.
Yeah, no, we don't believe
We don't believe in reindeers. They're not real.
Do you guys remember when Paul McCartney was killed and replaced? This is where we sort of think, the
Isn't he
gods, they replaced Paul McCartney, didn't they?
Yeah, there's lots of. You can see a lot of
We did make a video on that if you want to watch it.
You can see a lot of failures from the gods in the world, like the Beatles. You got the three Beatles and you've got Ringo Starr, and he was sort of like a last-minute god placement. He was like, fuck, I'll just put this. He sort of got all the Beatles, mixed them together, and made this disgusting, foul amalgamation of each Beatle, and they were like, let's just put him in there. So, hey, Ringo, if you're watching this, I don't mean that. So it's a new world, There's not just one Santa. I mean, this is shocking to most of you because I'm sure you all believe in the one Santa.
Yeah.
But there isn't. There's multiple. They each have their own precincts. They work on normal time, on not Santa time. So they can get to houses, but it requires a lot of Santas. And that's why kids are sort of getting less presents as the years goes on.
Yeah.
It's also because of the inflation rates, Santa never had to pay for presents.
Yeah.
He just manifested them with elf powers.
Yeah.
But the elves can't reach their elf powers in China.
Yeah.
It's too far from the poles. The poles give them their source of power, but the radiation from the gods is...
It's, they can't access that anymore.
They can't go there.
Nothing grows where a god has been slain.
Nothing grows. So the ice caps are melting.
Yeah. That's actually a direct cause of Santa's corpse. All the ice at the top, it's just disappeared. If you look at a map, you'll see there's nothing there anymore.
Yeah. And now this is where we get into the dark truth of the Grinch. The dark truth of the Grinch is that no one knows. So this is where we ask you guys to send us your theories in the comments about sort of, the Grinch has died many times, but could he really be dead this time?
Or is he waiting around every corner?
Evidence says no. I still think every Christmas that it could be gone in an instant.
Yeah.
The Grinch could come back.
He could come back, he could steal it again, he could kill even more people. And without Santa Claus to keep him in check,
Yeah, but that is Dad there to save us.
You know, with Santa time, we wouldn't even notice if the world was destroyed because it would just be gone.
If we go missing in an instant, the Grinch has probably kidnapped us in Santa time and will never come back.
You know, he could stop us at any time.
That's a good one.